Hey guys, so today we're going to be making a 10 slider, and this is going to help us with our multiplication and division when we're multiplying dividing numbers by 10, 100, 1,000 and so on. So all I've got is some scrap paper that I've cut up into thin strips, and I've got another whole piece of paper. I'm using coloured because it does make it easier to see, but you don't have to. The first thing I need to do is to write my columns on there. And what's really important is the columns are evenly spaced out, because you'll see when we multiply and divide the numbers, if they're not the same distance apart, it won't work. So I'm going to start with my units in the middle, and then I've got my tens, hundreds, my thousands, trying to keep them all the same size. And then of course I've got my tenths, I've got my hundredths. Now what's important there is that they're all the same distance apart, and I'm going to put my decimal point in as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these pieces of paper to slide numbers to show us what happens when numbers get 10 and 100 times bigger or smaller. So by here, either side of the decimal point, I'm going to do a slit. Trying to get as close to the decimal point as I can. And then what you do is you pop one of your pieces of paper through the holes so it goes behind the decimal point. So if I had a number, for instance, 32 times 10, I'd write 32 in the correct columns, and then if I times by 10, all the numbers move to the left. There's a common misconception that we add zeros. Well, we don't add a zero, because if I add a zero, that would go in the tenths column. So I'm going to times it by 10, which means I'm going to move it one column this way, and I just fill in the units with a zero, because there's nothing in there. So 32 times 10 is 320, and I can do it the other way. If I want to divide by 10, I move the numbers to the right. So if I divide by 10, I move them one column to the right, and you can see it's 32.0 or 32. And I can carry on going. I can do 32 divided by 10 again. So if I move it one more column again, it becomes 3.20 or 3.2. So it's a really visual way of seeing. And the way to remember, if I'm doing times 10 or times 100, is how many zeros there are. So if I'm doing 32 times 10, because there's one zero, I move it one space. If I want to do times 100, because there's two zeros in 100, I would move it two spaces. So 32 times 100 is 3,200. If I had 320 divided by 100, again, I'd move it that way, but because it's got two zeros, I'd move it twice. So 320 divided by 100, move it one space, move it again, is 3.2. So that's how to use a slider to multiply and divide by 10 and 100.